October 22nd was an ordinary Sunday evening in a small town of St. Joseph, Minnesota. 3 young boys rode their bikes along a poorly lit road on their way home. Suddenly, an unknown man stepped out of the darkness, armed and masked. He ordered the boys to throw their bikes into a ditch and lay down. Just minutes later, he had vanished without a trace with one of the boys, 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling, what would become one of the largest and most intense police investigations in US history. An investigation that eventually allowed the world to learn about the terrible fate Jacob was forced to face. Jacob Wetterling was born in 1978 in Minnesota. He was liked by everyone who knew him and did well in school with a very promising future. In the fall of 1989, Jacob spent an evening at home with his younger brother Trevor and their friend Aaron. A 14-year-old girl was also there to look after them. They came up with the idea to rent a movie for a movie night, and after having begged their parents over the phone, they agreed to it as long as the kids promised to be extra careful. Full of excitement, they biked to the store, picked out a movie and began heading home again. But that's when everything would take a dark turn that no one could have predicted. Suddenly, they saw a figure in the streetlight, and as they got closer, they saw that the man was holding something in his hand aimed at them. In a firm voice, he ordered them to throw their bikes aside and lie down on the ground. He asked how old they were, and after they answered, he wanted to see their faces. Jacob caught his attention the most, and the man ordered the other 2 boys to go toward a nearby grove of trees. If they even glanced back, he would shoot. Terrified, they took one last look at Jacob and then slowly walked away, unaware that would be the last time anyone saw him alive. When they later looked back from a distance, the road was completely empty. They then ran home as fast as they could to tell the babysitter what they had experienced. At first, she thought it was all a joke, but then when she saw their serious faces and heard the panic in their voices, she contacted her father, Merlin Jerzak, who immediately came over. He then immediately contacted Jacob's parents and the police. It went like this.
This is Merlin Jerzak calling. I'm right now next door to my neighbors, the Jerry Wetterling family.
That's where you're going?
And some of their boys went down to Tom Thumb to pick up a movie, and on their way back, someone stopped them. We believe that they have one of the boys because one of the boys did not come back with them.
Okay, were they picked up in a vehicle?
Just a second, I'll ask the boys, was there a vehicle there, or was he walking? They didn't see a vehicle. This person appeared on the road when they were bicycling back home.
And they don't know where the other friend is at?
They don't know where their brother and friend is at.
So we're missing 2 people?
They're just missing 1.
Did they see the individual at all?
Yes, they did. Did you see the individual at all? He had a mask on.
A search effort was quickly launched with police and volunteers. Search parties were organized and the search continued non-stop later into the night until darkness forced them to stop, unfortunately without any results. The police also faced a lot of criticism for having taken the disappearance too lightly and failing to question residents in the area thoroughly enough. The following day, the military also joined the search and the federal police, the FBI, was brought in. On October 24th, just 2 days after the disappearance, the police arrested a man suspected of the kidnapping. However, he was soon released due to lack of evidence. The case now began to attract attention across the US, and a reward of $100,000 USD was announced for anyone who could provide Jacob's whereabouts or otherwise help solve the case. Over 100 police officers were now working full-time on the search, but as time passed on without any major results, the search efforts began to scale down and the case was more or less put on ice. Well, not for everyone, more like for the police, because all around the state there were still a number of private individuals and others who refused to give up and continue the search. One of them was 43-year-old Joy Baker, who herself had children and was deeply affected by the case when she heard about it. She began taking notes and publishing her progress on a blog, and worked diligently on the case year after year. Eventually, she got in touch with Jared Child, a man the same age as Jacob who had also been kidnapped the same year. Jared had been sexually assaulted by an armed man who had forced him into a car. In his case, the kidnapper had for some reason let him go after the assault. No one was convicted for that kidnapping either, but Jared had drawn a sketch of the perpetrator. Both Joy and Jared were convinced that it was the same man who had kidnapped both boys. They therefore decided to work together to try to solve the case. Over the following years, they discovered many clues the police had previously ignored or hadn't fully followed up on. For example, they realized there were several unsolved assaults that occurred in the same town, and Joy and Jared were able to connect these and gathered so much information that the police actually chose to reopen the investigation. Now we're in the mid-2010s, and DNA technology had of course advanced significantly since 1989. Jared's clothes from the kidnapping had been preserved, and on them they found DNA traces that matched the then 59-year-old Danny James Heinrich. In 2015, Heinrich was arrested on suspicion of the kidnappings, and a year later, in 2016, Heinrich finally confessed that 27 years earlier he had kidnapped Jacob Wetterling. He had forced him into a car, handcuffed him, and drove to a remote and abandoned farm. In the car, Jacob reportedly cried and asked, "What did I do wrong?" Upon arrival, Heinrich assaulted him, but suddenly a police car drove by. In pure panic, Heinrich begged Jacob to turn around, and then he shot him. He then buried the body and left the scene. Heinrich was sentenced to 20 years in prison, a sentence that will likely be extended until the day he dies. Going to prison for child abuse involves a great personal risk, not only because of the long sentences, but also because of other prisoners who may take justice into their own hands. And there have been many instances where inmates have actually killed offenders. The court therefore agreed that Heinrich would avoid serving a sentence in Minnesota if he identified the location of Jacob's remains. He did, and the Wetterling family, Minnesota, and the US could finally see the mystery come to an end.